One lesson I learned from the pandemic came about more gradually, more organically as time progressed. As my timetables for cleaning and reorganizing the house were nearing successful completion. My usual behavior of being a type A personality, or more honestly, an A-, adapted substantially. I morphed from being an avid list writer and rigid schedule keeper to learning to relax my ways somewhat. I'm still happiest when on a time schedule and fulfilled when I complete it. But now I can see the advantages of lolling about and taking the time to just enjoy and postpone until whenever. The second and most raw for me was after the major tasks were all completed. I sat down and decided to resume some genealogical research. I love research in so many forms. It was one of the favorite aspects of my career, and I've continued to use it in various facets of volunteering since retirement. But now I was just piddling around, looking back at my family history, my DNA, and non-familial loved ones. What I thought would be merely a continuation of exploration and gleeful discovery yielded something else. Some things unexpected, some things life-jarring. Though the details are not what I'm here to discuss and will not, the lesson learned is what's important. I learned that things and our history are not as we necessarily have always thought they were. That often secrets may best be kept in the past, where people can honorably rest on their lives, laurels, and character, rather than what I may have uncovered, in which perhaps no one else alive may know. Most importantly, the lesson I learned is to prepare for knowledge in all forms, great, mundane, and gut-wrenching, and to learn to deal with it somehow. In closing, I will share these very wise words from former NFL coach Tony Dungy that really resonated with me about reactions. You can't always control circumstances. However, you can always control your attitude, approach, and response. Thank you. And now we'll hear from Rich Cann.
Good morning. From the outside, looking in, it would seem as if I was very fortunate during the time of the pandemic. Other than a few relatives with some minor COVID symptoms, none of my family or close friends had any serious health issues from COVID. My job allowed me to work from home, and being in the trucking industry, my employer actually had the best year on record. Since I live with my spouse, isolation really wasn't an issue, and my closest friends and family had always been remote, so not much had really changed. But if you look past the externals, things had changed. Early on during the pandemic, my mother reposted an article on Facebook from a group of doctors who claimed that COVID was no worse than the common flu. It was all the liberal media blowing things out of proportion in an attempt to limit our freedoms. My mother believed this. Wow. I found myself getting very angry, not at her directly, but at the world where so many lies had been repeated so many times that people I loved and cared about were believing them. I've always enjoyed keeping up on current events, but I found myself consumed by the latest news. I would read first thing in the morning, every break at work, and the last thing before I went to bed. I'd read the news and all the opinion pieces brimming with righteous anger, and I would get more angry. I found the World Health Organization website with all the COVID statistics and checked the death rates multiple times a day, and I would get angrier. Then in May, George Floyd was murdered. My anger grew. I was eating more and more, trying to make myself feel better. I found it harder and harder to concentrate at work, and my work suffered. These times were rough on my husband as well, and we started arguing and communicating less. By the beginning of this year, my weight had reached an all-time high. Something had to give. I was reminded of a sermon I heard way back in college. I remember very little about it except the title of the sermon, Living the Intentional Life. Wow, that was what I needed. If I was going to dig myself out of this hole, I needed to start living my life with much more intention. I needed to pay attention to where I was going and what was happening inside of me. There are two things that really helped me. First, I started getting out of bed as soon as I woke up and walked 1 to 2 miles. This broke the cycle of laying in bed each morning, obsessing over everything that was going wrong in the world. The second was to rededicate myself to journaling every morning. Many times it was just acknowledging my anger and sitting with it, not feeding it, just letting it be. It also gave me time to reflect on how I could be more intentional that day. Strategies that helped me: being intentional with the foods that I would buy, plan meals ahead of time that I knew were better for me. When I found myself getting distracted at work, pick one small task and tell myself, I can take a break after I finish this task. Of course, usually by the time I really got into the task, I'm totally forgetting about wanting to take a break. Cut way back on my news intake. This was an important one. And limit it at most to once a day. Make an effort to talk to my family more, not to try to persuade them, but to focus on the good parts, who they are, and not what they believe. And of course, being intentional in my marriage. Communicate even when it is hard. Focus on listening, not on being right. Intentionally plan on things to do together. I'm happy to say that these changes have really helped. I'm enjoying my job again. My physical health has improved. I'm feeling better about my family. Cuz and I are getting along better. It's not always easy. Yesterday, I got very frustrated. And when I got home after a long trip from Orlando, I ate way more than I needed. But this morning I got up, walked 1.2 miles, and wrote in my journal. I know that for me, in this time of COVID, if I want to stay physically and mentally healthy, I have to live my life with intention. And next, we'll hear from Ray Williamson.
Lessons I learned during the pandemic. Always put a plastic bag over my car mirror. Always wrap a rubber band around my hotel door lock. I still don't know why. I now peel bananas from the other end. I now know which photos don't have a traffic light. That I was using my can opener wrong all these years. Did you know that they recovered color film from a camera on the Titanic and got perfect photos? Who knew that it sank on such a sunny day? I learned to exit a clickbait site as soon as I see the next page box because none of those ever goes anywhere close to what they were promising. Boy, all kinds of stuff I didn't know back when I spent my time with friends, at museums, and plays, and concerts, and traveling. I've learned how much in-person human contact matters, even to introverts, and of the value of keeping up friendships even when we can't meet in person, and the various ways to do that. Sometimes I feel like a Mazda commercial, zoom, zoom. I've been reminded of the preciousness, sanctity, fragility, and brevity of life, and of our responsibilities toward one another, in covenant, both congregational and societal. I've been reminded of the fragility of our ecosystems and climate, and of our responsibilities toward one another in the interdependent web. And I've been reminded of my blessings: a respectful, loving relationship, a roof over our heads, Zoom, Netflix, cell phone service, air conditioning, and vaccines. Imagine doing time during the 1918 flu. This pandemic time coincided with my time on our board. I've learned anew that good, dedicated, passionate people can sometimes hone their differences to a sharp edge in our nation and our congregation. The confidences, privacy, principles, responsibilities, and consensus can be hard to balance. And that nevertheless, good people do good work. It's been and continues to be an honor. One of the difficult decisions continues to be around rejoining in person. We do miss each other. We need each other. We miss being together. And yet, through several waves of COVID, none as strong as our current spike, we have stayed relatively untouched by COVID compared to our neighbors. I credit that to our individually responsible behaviors and to our board's early choice to close our campus. When will we be back together? When the statistics align with our longing. Soon, I hope. I'm tired of this too. But it's been good, honestly. Not perfect, but good. Life is never perfect and never is expected for long. We had challenges, we made adjustments. We had inconveniences, nevertheless, we persisted. We worked together, even when apart. We learned something about ourselves and each other. Life moves on. But I can't put these lessons more succinctly than in our Unitarian Universalist 7 principles. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I, for one, feel blessed to still be here and am eagerly waiting the next chapter. And now we'll hear from Sue Hand.
What surprised me about myself during the pandemic. It wasn't a surprise that I never finished cleaning out a single closet. I knew that cleaning and downsizing were not two of my go-to activities. I got halfway through one closet and the box of giveaways sat in the middle of that room for months. It was a surprise that I was able to maintain my weight, if not my shape. With all those hours of nothing much to do, I expected my snack monster to be continually rearing her voracious head. I credit not buying the junk in the first place, but I must admit that even though I bought healthy food, I didn't necessarily eat it before it went bad. I just don't crave broccoli. Sorry, Weight Watchers. It wasn't a surprise that I started watching way too much TV, although some of it actually was educational. The ratio of good for me versus brain candy is still weighted towards the latter, though. I blame Netflix. I never binge watched before COVID, and now I have a list of one-season titles that I watched in 2 days, and multiple season titles I watch 4 to 6 episodes at a time. Partly it's distraction and partly it's hearing other human voices in my house. Sometimes it's just not enough to live with just cats. It was a surprise that both my cats started climbing up onto my lap to sleep. I got in the habit of calling Bella when I sat in the recliner with my feet up, and she actually obliged by hopping up and settling in for her daily massage. If I were a cat, I would have done the same. But Fleur, the evasive and skittery Fleur, She had avoided my lap for 10 years and would rarely let me pet her for more than 2 seconds at a time. So to have her jump up and muscle her way into the remaining space was a kitty miracle. It wasn't a surprise that I missed going out to eat. I love eating, and what is better than having someone else cook it for you, serve it to you, and then clean up after you? Plus, you get a variety of food you would never cook at home, at least I do. I will be adventurous choosing something off a menu, whereas if I go looking for that recipe in a cookbook, I am invariably missing 2 or 3 necessary ingredients, things I would never use and never buy. If a restaurant had served me some of the meals I ate over the last year, I would have complained to the chef and never eaten there again. It was a surprise how much I missed seeing people. Psychologically, I've always tested as an introvert, though over the years I knew I was inching my way closer to the center. There have been lots of times in the past that I've walked into a room and found the first kid or cat to relate to, so I didn't have to talk to the grown-ups. If there were no kids and no cats, I'd often leave. Now I consider myself a gregarious introvert. If I'm comfortable with the members of the group, I participate, and sometimes you can't shut me up. But being alone 24/7 really underscored how much I miss interacting face-to-face with real, live people, and how much I missed hugging. I figure I'm owed about 500 hugs, 7 for each Sunday. So when the time comes, line up, people. The biggest lesson I learned is that I'm willing to do what it takes to help us end this pandemic. I'll wear a mask even though I hate breathing stale hot air. I'll keep my distance even though I'm dying to hug you. I'll get vaccinated even though I hate shots and even though the vaccine isn't 100% effective. And I'll get the booster when it's available to me. I'll Zoom until my face falls off. And I'll do it without complaining much because I feel it's my contribution to ending the spread of this virus. And I hope everyone else is willing to do the same. Your precautions keep us all safer. Thank you.